Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm thrilled to have Brian Face on the show, the owner of Face to Face Financial, a fee-only RIA in Michigan. Brian's career started in the Wirehouse, literally cold calling to try to get enough business to keep his job. After a couple years of that, he took a break to work for his dad's business before deciding he wanted to do what he felt was real financial planning. He ended up starting a Farm Bureau insurance firm because he felt like there were a lot of people that needed help with insurance, and that was a way to do so. He didn't really know that comprehensive financial planning was even an option. He ultimately left that company to join a fee-based RIA to do comprehensive financial planning, but found what he really wanted was to work for himself. He was able to take all but one client with him when he launched his new RIA, and you'll hear how he was able to make that transition so successfully. The short of it is, don't overthink it. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/85. In addition to the typical resources, you'll find a link to our recently launched book, co-authored by Kitsis and myself, titled The Monthly Retainer Model, What It Is, Why It Works, and How to Implement It in Your Firm. This month's podcasts are brought to you by life insurance innovator Haven Life. Haven Life Insurance Agency offers the first non-commission term life insurance that your clients can buy entirely online. The prices are affordable, the application process is simple, and the policies are fully backed by Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. Plus, some qualified, healthy applicants can even be approved for coverage without the need for a medical exam. This is life insurance the modern way. Visit havenlife.com/advisors to learn more about how Haven Life is partnering with fee-only financial advisors. Please note that the opinions expressed by participants on the podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Haven Life. Visit havenlife.com/advisors. Also be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask us questions, and more. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, Al. Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited. For anybody who is not already in the VIP group, if you've listened to any podcast, you know I'm constantly pushing the VIP group. But the reason is, and a really good example of why I push it so hard, is this interview actually, because it came out of a question that one listener posed around how to transition clients that were paying a 12B1 fee to being fee only. And you were able to jump in there and help answer some questions, which prompted me to bring you on. So for anybody out there that has not joined the VIP group, just do it. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. It's free. You get to interact with other listeners and other experts that, you know, have expertise that I don't have, that Kitsis doesn't have. So you sort of get to see a full range of expertise. But enough of the self-promotion. Brian, thank you for taking the time to be on. As usual, we'll sort of start at the beginning. So how did you initially get into sort of the career of financial planning?
I guess I'm a second-generation planner. My father was an advisor pretty much my whole life growing up. He started selling life insurance for a number of years, and then he became into financial planning and more into retirement planning. So growing up, being 10, 15 years old, he would take me to factories where he would do their 401k and do the presentations, and just became really interested in, I've always been good at numbers, always been good at math, but I was really interested in seeing that he was helping regular people, being able to help regular people and still have a good job doing it. This is something he left the industry, I don't know, probably in 98, 99, where he went and worked for Ernst & Young and worked on their E-Trade thing with them and did some other kind of financial education stuff. So now he's out of the business. So I just kind of grew up wanting to be a planner. I think in my mind, what a financial planner wasn't exactly what it ended up being when I first worked at my first wirehouse, which was Wells Fargo Advisors. It started as A.G. Edwards and Wachovia Securities, and then eventually got bought by Wells Fargo Advisors. So I started in the business during the exciting time of the downturn.
Sure. So what year did you start?
Well, originally I started in 2007. I'm someone who was in the business for about 2.5 years and then left and decided it wasn't for me. I went to Western Michigan University. I got a degree. The main focus was finance. They didn't have the CFP program at the time, which they do now, which I'm very jealous about. because I'm not someone who has a CFP. I am going to get that, but it's something that I would have loved to have because, the truth is, if you got a degree in finance before, it was really just about numbers and it wasn't really about helping. It wasn't personal finance. It was more, I guess I'd call it.
It was corporate finance, not personal.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, that's not what I was really interested in. The other thing is when you go work at a wirehouse, and they're right. In that business at that time, it was a lot of commission. It also was, the fee-based was kind of new. Fee-based really didn't start until the 2000s, but it was becoming more popular in the late 2000s. But, you needed to work with people that had money because that's just the model they had. And if you didn't, you still got to eat. And I remember a guy, it was actually my manager, said, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of maybe people that are middle class because, that's just the way the business is.
So basically saying you had to work with rich people so you could get paid because, the way you got paid at Wells Fargo was not a model that worked for middle income.
Yeah. And I still think the model today is not good. It's still saying us as financial people that do the right things with our money, we basically have to starve for a while to be able to help people. There's not really a good model per se to say, hey, you're going to start out making a good salary or a decent salary in this industry because, there's very few big RIAs that bring people in. It's mostly, that's just not the world we live in. It's growing, but that's not the world we live in.
Yeah, I hope in 10 years we can, we'll have all these XY Planning Network advisors and all these other advisory firms out there that are hiring young talent, and giving them, I'll say, the right path. I would love for us to have some brand names as big as Wells Fargo that gets to go into the finance departments and poach anybody they want because they've got a brand name. But, they bring folks in like yourself and sort of churn them out. I mean, it's not, you don't hear a lot of folks who are like, oh, you know what? I went to a wirehouse my first 2 years and just loved it. Like it was just this amazing experience. I'm so glad I did it.
No, because I was still in the world of cold calling. That was still kind of, and that was on the edge. You got a list and no, that wasn't fun. So it was on the edge, but the thing is, the training was still about cold calling. So, when you got in the industry, you either had to go sell insurance, which I didn't want to do. They didn't pay you a salary. They didn't, you had to sell stuff you didn't believe in, which I believe in insurance, but I believe in term insurance. So I said, I don't want to do that. So I went and worked at the wirehouse. The funny thing about the wirehouse is I almost worked in the wire. When I started, I think I was like 28, but I almost got a job right out of college at 23. And this is why I believe relationships are so important. The same guy that hired me at 28 was the guy that wanted to hire me at 23, but the corporate was for Legg Mason, which they were a pretty well-known boutique firm in Sarasota, Florida. I would have had it made because I was going to work underneath another guy as a junior advisor and eventually take over his business. They just thought I was too young, so they told me to come back. But that's why I believe relationships, you don't ever know who you're going to meet and how it's going to change in the future.
No, it's so true. And it's one of the things that I encourage young planners that are sitting inside of, a firm. If your boss is not all that supportive of you getting out of the office, I encourage you to find ways to do it. Get to national conferences, go to regional events, even if it's virtual stuff, like get out there and meet people. And I'm not talking about just like randomly connect with folks on LinkedIn, even if it's getting on Twitter so that you can actually have conversations back and forth. Because, most listeners know that's where I met Kitsis, was on Twitter. It's amazing the relationships you can build even if it is online. Ideally, though, you can get out, get in person, and start to meet folks because you never know when you're going to need to make that phone call to say like, hey, looking for a new opportunity, or hey, have this situation and I don't know how to handle it. Any advice? And you need that Rolodex of people because you just never know when they're going to pop up and you're going to have a need for them. And more importantly, when they're also going to have a need for you and be able to call in a favor, which is always nice as well. So, okay, so you graduated college, you had your degree in finance. You had originally talked to this firm with Legg Mason down in Sarasota. They told you to come back. So is that when you started at Wells Fargo?
No, so I got out of the two things I always liked in my life were finance and cars. So I just kind of was discouraged, So I went into mortgages is what I did. I got a job in a mortgage. So I worked in mortgages for a couple of years. And then I got back into the car business, the high-end exotic cars. I was in Florida, so there's but I ended up working for Tampa Bay Bentley Bentley, Rolls-Royce, and Lotus. Now they have a bunch of other things, and I was a wholesaler before that in between. So that was just something I liked. That wasn't my passion. That was just kind of like, okay, well, I need to make money. And I did make good money doing it, and I enjoyed it. But because I was discouraged. And then I finally said, about 27, I said, you know what? I got to try this. Let me see if I'm going to I felt like this is what I needed to do. So I went and worked at the Wirehouse for about 2.5 years, and it just wasn't working for me. I just didn't feel like I was helping the people I wanted to be able to help. I didn't feel like I was, I guess, at the end of for most of us, we do this because of the meaning that we feel that we're here to help people in their personal finances and help them become better next year than they were this year. And 20 years from down the road, hopefully it's even better. So I just I didn't really see another opportunity. So I just kind of gave up and said, okay, well, I'm going to do something else because this isn't it. That's kind of my transition. My father was having some health issues. So I went and worked with him. He owned a leadership development company. So we coached managers on how to manage their employees, employee happiness things, which he still has the business now. So I helped him for a number of years, and then I moved back to Michigan. So I was in Florida for 10 years after college. So that's kind of my progression. Then when I came back to Michigan, I said, well, what am I going to do next? And I just still didn't see an opportunity for financial planning. So I decided to open a Farm Bureau insurance agency, which we did home, auto, and life insurance.
A little bit of a switch. Before we dig into the Farm Bureau, I'm just curious. So you spent 2 years at the Wirehouse.
Yeah.
As somebody who has never worked in a wirehouse, can you just sort of describe for me, like, what's the working environment there? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Is it really just, because we see the movies, right, where all you do is pick up the phone all day and yell at people. So I don't think that's actually accurate. But, like, what do you do all day? Kind of what's your job?
Okay, so I think if you're in New York City or something, that's probably little more mentality. I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, so it's a little more laid-back atmosphere. So there was 20-some advisors in my office, 1 or 2 new people, so me and I think one other person at the time. And most of these guys and gals were old. I mean, we had a lady that was 80-some years old as an advisor. Yeah. So it was, your day-to-day, they have a training program that's 2 years long that they put you through. So you go to St. Louis and they do training. The problem is the training's outdated. It's really about cold calling, and it's about, at the end of the day, they are right. And I remember them saying this, and I believe this now, and I talk about this in my mastermind group with XYPN, and is you're not going to fail because you don't know the difference between this ETF and that ETF. You're going to fail because you don't have enough clients. And that's no different today. And so that was their big focus, really, is you had to be out there and meeting people. And that was true. Now, the other thing that I did while I was there is I kind of met another advisor there. There's not older, but he was I say older, but he was probably 60 at the time, in his 50s. And I worked with him. So I'd help him on some things. So I worked on my own, but I'd help him with some things he didn't want to mess with, right? Maybe he had some old clients that, didn't have a certain asset level. And so I'd kind of reveal, check out what they currently had in their allocation and just do things like that. So that's kind of what I was doing. I still would go out and network. I'd go out and meet people. But again, you have to look at where you're fishing, right? Well, I really enjoyed fishing for people that were in their 30s and 40s. Well, the problem was they're not really going to be my clients at that place.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, I guess, model. And, we joke about the broker-dealers and the wirehouses and all this being outdated. But, whenever my understanding is when you truly live it, that's when you really see how outdated it is, because you're talking about, learning how to cold call. And I'm assuming they're going through and teaching you how to handle objections and how to keep people on the phone and get them interested in what you're doing. Like, did you actually sign up clients, like, literally by just cold calling? Like, is that a way that you actually were able to get some clients, or were the majority of your clients coming from, networking events and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So the problem was, because we're on the edge of the do not call list, I don't know when the do not call list came out, but maybe it came out in like 04 or 03. Mm-hmm. And so many people had signed up for it that everybody that had money was on the do not call list, right? And because they're smart, right? It's like, so I couldn't call them. So you get lists and you do things like that. A.G. Edwards, so the training program I actually went through was with A.G. Edwards, which was bought by Wachovia Securities, but it was their training program. There was all about, and I think this is good for XY Planning members, is it was all about opening accounts. So you had to open like 20 accounts in 6 months. Okay, it had nothing to do with how much money. You could have a $500 account, or you could have a $500,000 account. It was all about numbers, and they were saying create activity. So open as many accounts as you can, and that's really was how you were hitting your goals. So create activity. And I think that's so true in anything, is you need activity to be able to, move to the next step.
Well, there's really a lot of research around how people buy and how they engage with vendors. And I mean, one of the things is that once someone pays you once, they're much more likely to pay you again. Getting them to pay you the first time, getting that first account opened is the hard one. Getting the second account is much easier. The third one is easier, and it just gets easier from there. So I can absolutely understand the model of, just get as many people with their foot in the door, just anything you can get, because we can always upsell, because it's much easier to upsell to an existing client than to a new one, because, drumming up new business is always hard. But then it also kind of comes back to, are you getting the right kind of business? Which in the Wirehouse model, it's sort of, there's not a wrong type of client as long as they have money. You have something to sell them, I guess, is just sort of the reality. But
I think the biggest problem with the wirehouses now is, so when you're a new advisor there, whether it's at Edward Jones or if it's at, Merrill Lynch or it's wherever, your goals are still based on things. They're the same goals they were in 2000 that they are now. But the problem is, in 2000, I was taking $100,000. Now, I wasn't, because I wasn't in the business in 2000, but you were taking $100,000, you were putting it in an A share, and you were getting $5,000 up front, right?
Yep.
Well, in the fee world, even if it's fee-based, not fee only, but fee-based, now I'm taking $100,000, I'm putting it in at 1%, and I'm getting $1,000 divided by 12 or a quarter, however you want to bill it. So they haven't set it up so it's realistic to actually get someone through it. The industry is changing from the pricing structure, which I think is a positive thing, but I feel like they haven't figured out how to actually come behind that and figure out, how do I bring in new people? They've done things like, some of the big wirehouse now, and you've probably heard, I think Merrill Lynch, is anything under $250,000, you don't get paid on.
Yep.
Now, I love this. Okay. This is the best thing ever for me. Right. I'm thinking, great, because there's a lot of accounts under $250,000. I would be happy to help those clients. So, those kind of things I think are positive for us.
Agreed. Yeah. And yet, Merrill Lynch also came out and said that they're now 100% fiduciary. So they're going fiduciary on all their retirement accounts, which is also interesting to see. It's a changing world and it's changing very rapidly. I will say that we know the broker-dealers and the wirehouses, they're always in catch-up mode, and it's just the size of their companies, right? I mean, even large RIAs are a little bit in catch-up mode as we go forward, just because things change very rapidly. And when you have a big company, it's hard to pivot. So I remember when I was doing even just hourly planning, I talked to an advisor at Wells Fargo, and he asked if he could send me some clients that had come to him because they were looking for an hourly advisor, and he literally wasn't allowed to bill hourly. Like, they didn't have the model set up that he could do anything other than sell them a product, and all they needed was a couple hours of advice. And he was just like, I'd rather not do it if I'm not getting paid. So, call Alan, you can pay him and he'll do it. And I just thought that was so baffling to me that they were so far behind that they couldn't even do hourly, much less some type of retainer or subscription model. But, it's good for us, like you said, that they're slowly moving this direction, but, so slowly that we get to stay ahead of the curve. But anyway, so you spent a couple years at the Wirehouse, and then you made the move back to Michigan. So sort of what was your path then towards, your current place of having launched your own firm?
Well, so I opened a Farm Bureau insurance agency. I still, again, didn't think, I wanted to do something that could help people in their financial side. And what I did like about home and auto insurance is I find a lot of people are underinsured and nobody really helps them. Everybody believes you just go online and save $10, but you might not have the right insurance. You just might not. And so I say with insurance, we only need it when we need it. When we don't need it, it's not a big deal. But when we actually need it, that's the reason we paid for it. So I kind of said, okay, well, maybe this is a way I can still help people build a business. The whole time, I think I was missing the personal finance side. And there were really a few reasons. The one reason was numbers wise. So when you have a home and auto insurance business, you need thousands of clients. You don't really get to build the relationship that maybe you want to, because it's just numbers. It's numbers.
Yeah, you don't have enough time.
Yeah, you don't have time. You also know clients are going to leave you, even though you might really like the clients and they like you. I mean, you can't blame them when they're, when they can save $300 somewhere else.
Yep, they price shop.
Right? So Geico and Progressive have made it very price sensitive. So I think that was probably 2.5 years ago where I actually called you, Alan, and I don't know, again, I have no clue how I even learned about XY Planning Network at that time. I saw something. It might have been a podcast. It might have been, I can't remember at the time. But, at the time you had like 30 members. Now you have over 350 members. And I thought what you were doing was awesome. But I just said, I don't have any clients. Is this the best thing to do? I was about to get married and I had other situations in my life. And so I had an opportunity to join another advisor who was a CFP, but he wasn't fee only. He was mostly fee based, still did some commission, but not much. Really only commission if it was like a small account and just, again, it would be a small account. He never, not because he didn't want to talk to him, but he just didn't have time to talk to somebody who had $5,000, He had a decent sized business. Very nice guy. So I joined his firm and was there for almost 2 years. Probably a year into it, I was just thinking this DOL stuff was happening. And I just was like, where do I see myself in the future? So as you and Michael have talked in the number of time about teams, there was another guy involved. There was 3 of us and it just didn't end up working out the way everybody thought it was going to work out. And so it was just better for me and the guy to kind of go our own way. So either I was going to stay with the Wirehouse, or not the Wirehouse, it was an independent, it was Cambridge, which they were a great independent firm. If I was going to have an independent firm, I thought they were great. They were out of Iowa. But the DOL just told me, I don't need a Wirehouse. Why would I pay a Wirehouse when I don't need one? And because I'm doing fee only anyway. So I had to look and see where I thought the industry was going the next 20 years, next 30 years.
So I'm curious, when you did the research there, and I'm familiar with Cambridge, I hear great things about them. Do you know what their fee model is? Like, how much would you have had to pay Cambridge if you had opened your firm with them?
Well, you wouldn't have to pay them per se anything to open it, but it'd be like this, right? For instance, even my E&O was double the price I'm paying here, or actually over double the price. But there's just a lot of little fees that you get tacked on. And then they also take, depending on who you're with, even an independent's going to take, 15% of your pay. So
15% of gross or more.
Yes. Plus you're paying fees. So I added up the numbers and it just, I could join XY Planning Network and pay less money, and I'm not getting any of my pay taken away from TD Ameritrade. So, that's a big difference.
Yeah. Trust me, when I look at revenue models and I think how much better of a business would XY Planning Network be if I got 25% of all of our members' gross revenue? That's a pretty heck of a business model. But we do, the same way that you said, you're looking 10 or 20 years out and saying, where do you want to be? We're looking at that too and thinking, one, in 10 to 20 years, do we really think that would be a model? And 2, I always wanted to design XYPN to be something I would have joined when I was starting a business. And the same way you looked at it, it's like 15% of revenue plus a bunch of fees. And now I've seen some of the independent broker dealers are starting to charge monthly platform fees in addition to the percentages and random fees, just depending on what it is. It adds up really fast. And I think that's why they're struggling, honestly, to stay afloat, because whenever you sort of evaluate the options now, it doesn't look very good.
Yeah. And I don't know how the regular wirehouses, now a few of them have been smart, like Raymond James and even Wells Fargo Advisors, where they have an independent platform now. So you can, now you only pay them, whatever, 10 basis points, 5, depending on your revenue, you might pay them 10 or 5. And instead of the giant, at a big firm, you can be $1 million producer and you still might get 50%, or you still might get 50 or 40 or 50% of your pay taken out. Now, obviously, you have to run the numbers as a business owner and see what all the other things cost you. But now I think for your guys' model, obviously, when you went into RIA worlds, people technically can have an RIA and not pay anything, but they have to pay other things. But what you did is kind of like RIA in a box, I feel like, is you've done that, but you put a community to it. And, that there, for a lot of people that are probably part of XYPN, including me, has been more of the value than the other things.
Right. Yeah, I used to joke that people come for the discounts and they stay for the community, because ultimately, while we can basically save people money in terms of our fees with the services that we're offering, which is obviously what we want to do, what makes us so much fun, what makes XYPN just so much fun to be around, is really the people that you get to hang out with. And so it's always good to hear from members that they're seeing that as well, because obviously that has been a central piece of our goal. Okay, so just to take a step back, you've worked at you were doing PNC with farmers. Did you take any clients with you to the RIA whenever you made the switch over?
All but one.
You took all of your clients with you from farmers?
Wait, are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. So from farmers to Cambridge, did you take any clients with you whenever you got started at that RIA?
To Cambridge, you're talking about. When I went from Farm Bureau to Cambridge? Well, yes. I didn't have any investment clients, but yes, I took one client. It was my best. It ended up being one of my best clients.
Oh, nice.
And they moved over with me again. What I liked about it was I really only told a couple people that I was leaving and let them know what I was doing because I wanted to choose who I wanted as clients. And not that I didn't like other people, but it just, in my mind, I thought this one client in particular was somebody that was close to retirement, and she was a client I really liked. And I said, hey, I hope she's somebody that I'd want to work with for the next 20 or 30 years. That's the person I'd want to work with. So she came, but everybody else, I don't think I've had anybody move over from Farm Bureau. Now, from Cambridge, I had a little different setup there.
Yeah, so talk me through how did you have your own clients at your RIA that was with Cambridge?
Yeah, so we were dual registered. So we were RIA and we had through Cambridge. What I did with the deal there was I got paid a salary for it. Basically, I signed a contract for like a year's salary. Any client I brought in, we split revenue, but the client was mine. But then he had what we'll call C&D clients, so clients under $100,000 that I helped service. So that was kind of the thing. And I will tell you, when you look at that old business model, some of these advisors have clients that are paying them $10 a year because they have, an old A-share with a 12B1 fee that's got $3,000. And that's not a good model. That's just not a good model for them. And it's not a good model for the client because they don't ever talk to the client. But the clients, obviously, if that's the model they want, they should just go on their own and go down to TD Ameritrade and open up their own account. It doesn't help anybody. So that was the situation. So I didn't sign a non-compete. I signed an agreement basically stating that any of his clients were his and any of the clients I brought in were mine. And so the agreement ended up being great because at Wells Fargo Advisor, I signed a non-compete for 2 years where I couldn't touch anybody for 2 years afterwards. But I was out of the business for longer than 2 years. So.
Yeah, and it's a very, very common question that we get for folks that are working, especially inside of broker-dealers, just because they tend to have better controls around things like, having folks sign non-competes. RIAs just aren't as prevalent, but they certainly do exist that, what do I do if I have this non-compete? And you just have to look at it, and you've got to talk with an attorney that lives in your state, that specializes in your state, because every state is different when it comes to non-competes. For instance, and this is not legal advice, so my lawyer doesn't freak out. In California, for instance, I've been told, non-competes are almost impossible to enforce. Just California doesn't really uphold you can't, work. But non-solicitation of clients is different. So you have I'm not going to, non-compete says, well, you can't go out and be a financial planner within 20 miles of our office. Non-solicit says you can't actually solicit any of the clients that are with the firm if you choose to leave. And a lot of times you have non-compete, non-solicit. So it sounds like you had it was done better than just a strict non-compete, that it was simply, the clients that you brought on, you could then take with you, but the clients that were already there with the RIA, you could not take with you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and it was just, this is a one guy thing. So he kind of just, I don't even know where he got the document, but it was a pretty basic document. And that was just the agreement that we set up. When I joined his group, I interviewed like 10 advisors. So I was looking for an advisor to join with to maybe take over their business. That was kind of my goal. Because I also said, well, that's going to be the easiest way and the most productive way to building a business. And, if you get in that situation, it's not a bad situation to be in at all if it works out for you. I just also saw that this guy, he was going to retire later than I thought. And you'll find this a lot. I mean, these guys worked really hard to build their business and they think they want to retire in X year. And then it goes back some and it goes back. And, and I don't blame them. They're not sure. And it's a business you can be in until you're 80. I mean, you see advisors in there until they're 80. So, I mean. Well,
we still have more CFPs over 70 than under 30 in the U.S. So that'll tell you about the how long you can be an advisor. And, I'll put it more bluntly, and I don't mean to put this on your boss or your prior boss. So I'll just say in general, many of us are getting very tired of this unsigned succession promise that keeps happening, because a lot of young talent gets brought into firms under this guise of, hey, take over for me, right? It's the dream. And yet it so rarely works out because, like I said, whenever you really start to run the numbers, it doesn't make sense from a seller's perspective. Like, why would I sell? I might as well just sort of keep it and keep milking it. It's like the world's greatest annuity. It just keeps spitting off income until the day you die. And you lose a few clients here and there, but you don't have to do any business development. You just get to meet with the clients you love and kind of go into the sunset, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you got to be upfront about it and not bring in young people and promise them that you're going to give them the firm basically, and then not. But that aside, so you were working with his C&D clients. Were you finding, I guess, did you start to develop sort of lead planning relationships at that point with those clients that gave you the ability to work with them more going forward?
Yeah, so that was kind of the goal. And we did do some of that, and we uncovered some assets. So that was the main goal. When you have a D client in particular, they might have assets other places, but you might not have worked with them too much. So financial planning, that's one of the great things about this firm is why I was there towards the beginning. While I was there, we started using Money Guide Pro, and we started really implementing financial planning. That was part of what we were doing. And that was one of our basically, propositions that we were saying. A lot of advisors, they call themselves planners, but they don't do financial planning. They do investment advice. So that was one of our things to kind of say, hey, this is the fee we charge, but we're doing things other people aren't doing. So, and that's true. There's a lot of those older advisors do not want to do planning. It's not exactly something, they don't want to learn it. So yes.
I mean, it's like asking an auto mechanic that's been working on gas engines their whole career to suddenly start working on Tesla's, all electric engines. Like, not gonna happen. and they don't need to, right? Like they don't have to in order to sort of do what they're going to do. But you, being a young advisor, you can't just adopt that old model. I would not want to get into the business of trying to start, no one's trying to start a new wirehouse or a new independent broker dealer these days. It's just not the business model of the future, which is obviously sort of the opinion you had because it's the direction you've gone with your RIA. So, all right. So talk to me about the transition then from working at this firm. You made the decision to go out on your own and then launching the RIA. Sort of what did that process look like for you?
So I'd been thinking about it for a while. And unfortunately, I missed the boat by about 2 weeks from your new compliance fee. And I heard like you guys had like an overwhelming, it was like a push to join or something. Like people were like, oh, I got to join before. Because we had people in my mastermind group that joined just because of this, compliance.
Oh, funny.
But I had a conversation with him. It was like August 1st or 2nd. And we just kind of said, hey, this isn't working. We just realized it wasn't working for both of us. And, he was a great guy. And we kind of took a month to figure out what we were going to do, whether I was going to kind of work there. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was, just looking at the different options and kind of went back to XY planning, which I'd been listening to in the podcast for a while. And I'd been thinking about, if this isn't going to work, then that's probably the direction I'm going, is to just start. If I'm going to stay in this business again, I'm going to start my own RIA. That's what I'm going to do. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing it. I left there in October, which again, they weren't like a regular wirehouse. I told them I was leaving and they're like, oh, when do you want to leave?
Usually get escorted to the door. So it's nice that they gave
That's right. So that's what I thought was going to happen. So he's like, no, well, do you want me to put the date like 2 weeks out? Or our OSJ he actually was in our office too. And he was a nice guy, so it was a totally different situation. They were completely, they let the clients, they were pretty fair about everything they did. And so I started in October with XYPN, knowing I was going to leave. I started working with you guys. I think I signed up like October 1st. And then I learned some things along the way that I try to give advice for people that when I see on the form, like get your LLC before you even sign up because you're going to need it. And it's going to take you a week to get it. So, because time is money for me. For some people, that's not in the situation they're in. But for me, every day that I waited, TD Ameritrade took almost a month for me to get going.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So that was the other thing.
Yeah. I mean, it just takes time. And if you're in a rush, like, and I understand from TD Ameritrade's perspective, they've got to go through and do what they've got to do. But, whenever you're in a rush, that can be a real challenge.
I can't knock TD Ameritrade because, one, I feel blessed that I can be on the network because I don't have $15 million under management. So I think that's another benefit of XYPN that made me kind of make a decision because I wanted to go that route. I was using Pershing before, which you guys had some platforms that still use Pershing, which actually might have made it easier for me to transition over, but it really wasn't that hard. You had to get the clients to do the paperwork. The biggest thing was the time. I didn't think about the time, so it took me. You guys were great, and I think Travis is drinking from a fire hose. I don't know when the guy sleeps because he emailed me and I was like 7 p.m.
So Travis is our compliance associate that handles all of the initial registrations, and he is really good. So I only hear great things about him.
Yeah, he did a great job, and I know he's got a lot. I know he's not just doing 1 or 2 at a time. Let's just say that.
No, he's not.
So, that process actually moved quicker than I expected, which made the other TD thing move slower than I expected. So I didn't really even have my clients moved over until probably end of December is when they actually took me about a month to move them.
So tell me about the process for moving clients. So you had these agreements in place that, clients that you had already brought on were yours to keep. So one, were you able to take any clients that you have been working with that were your boss's clients or those CD clients? Did you get to keep any of those?
No, and I didn't call any of them. And that was fine with me because we had a relationship with him, and I'm sure some of them he might have been okay, but I think it wasn't in a situation. I had all the clients I had were really the D. So there was another guy involved, and he had a lot of the C clients. He had his own business too. And that's the other thing. It got a little more muddled because there was 3 people involved rather than just 2. So that definitely gets more muddled. But yeah, I just brought my own clients. And every client but one moved over with me. And the truth is the one that moved over with me, it probably wasn't, we weren't the right fit anyways, but it happened to be a friend of mine. So, and I grandfathered some people in. So what I mean by that is some people are below I don't have minimums, but I have minimums for what you have to pay me, right? So
right, a minimum fee, not a minimum asset level.
That's right. So he technically would have been paying me less than. So my model has, if you have over 100,000 invested with me and you're paying me 1% to manage your money, you don't pay the other stuff. So financial planning is included in that. So that this guy in particular had less than that. He wouldn't have wanted to pay the extra thing. I would have grandfathered him in, but he wasn't a good client because
friends can be tough.
And some people just are scared of the stock market, and you can't please everybody. Some people just, they don't want to be in the stock market, but then they like their friends that are getting returns of 15% in the last quarter. And, you just can't please everybody. And you just have to find out that that's okay.
So what was your fee structure at Cambridge? How were most of those clients paying you when they were there?
Most of my clients were fee-based, and we started out, we changed it a couple of times, but it was around 1.25. We weren't really we were on the lower end, I would say, for the lower side of the money side. So what I said, 1.25, I think up to 250. And then we were like 1.1 up to like 500. Then it was like 1% up to $1 million or something. That's pretty close.
And then were there any commissions whenever you put people in certain investments or 12B1s or anything like that?
The 12B1s have pretty much went away. If, for instance, Cambridge did not allow 12B1s in retirement accounts. So if they got it, if the fund you put them in kicked off a 12B1, it went back to the client. So they credited it back.
Gotcha.
They changed that. That was their thing. They changed it before I got there, but that wasn't like that with everybody. Now, if it was in a cash account or a brokerage account, then you could still get the 12B1, which I didn't have any of those. But but we offered annuities. We offered life insurance. We really just did term life insurance. That's it. Annuities, we did do some annuities, not a lot of annuities, but annuities are a funny thing. And obviously now I do no annuities, but annuities, I don't think they're the best things for any client, but some clients, they just can't sleep at night.
Sure.
They'd rather pay somebody to guarantee them something, even though they're paying them way too much money. That's why I tell clients, you're buying insurance around mutual funds. Is that what you want to do? You want to pay somebody insurance around mutual funds because it's just going to eat into your principal. And some people, they think annuities are the best thing ever, And so anyways, we went through
and that's the behavioral side, right? Like
yes.
Financial planning is an art and a science. And sometimes we approach it from the science part that just is just mind boggling that, anybody would buy an annuity because it just from a financial number standpoint doesn't make sense. But there are folks out there that behaviorally need that security. Where we run into issues is just the compensation model has been put in place that encourages the selling of certain types of annuities, like deferred variable annuities to really old people that, absolutely should not be buying that product, right? That it's really it's aligning the incentives that has been the issue. That annuities are not bad. They are simply a tool. They can be used in a very good way. They can be used in very bad ways. And unfortunately, we've had too many people using them in bad ways, so they've gotten a bad rap. But that aside, so...
Well, yeah. So there's some fixed index annuities that pay up to 18%. Now, we didn't have those and we didn't offer those, but I knew people that did.
Bought them at the right time.
And that's my biggest disappointment in the DOL is they went after so much of the A-share mutual fund person. And really the problem that in our industry is the life insurance and annuity salespeople. That's not it's the guy making 8%, 10%. On pushing you in an annuity or a whole life insurance product. And it's not the guy putting you in an A-share, but they're not. Most of those fixed index annuity people, they don't have to be securities licensed.
Right. Just insurance licensed.
Just insurance licensed. So they sell everything they can because that's what they have to offer. And so I hope that changes in the future. I really hope.
Agreed. Yeah, I am by no means a DOL expert. We could ask Kitsis about this, but I know the DOL was hamstrung a little bit because, one, they only had governance over retirement accounts. So they, and theoretically, a lot of life insurance and annuities are being sold inside of brokerage accounts for tax savings. Obviously, we've all had the IRAs that come in with a annuity inside of it, and you just wonder how in the world someone sleeps at night having made that sale, but teach their own. Okay. So sorry, annuity salesman, hammering on you a little bit, but welcome to the new reality, I guess, of financial planning. Okay. So you were at Cambridge, you have the clients that are mostly, paying you an asset-based fee. You have a few commission things happening. And so whenever you made the transition, you brought folks over and you said you charge a monthly fee, which I looked on your website earlier. So you're charging $100 a month up to $100,000 AUM. If they have over 100,000 AUM, that monthly fee drops off and then continue on with the AUM. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So my website might not be really great when it's explaining that. So basically, you pay both, okay, until you get to the $100,000, and at that point,
then the monthly fee falls off.
If Arlene's listening to this, she might give me a hard time because she said, "Well, those numbers don't add up. The guy's getting a lot better deal that's coming over with $100,000, and then the guy who's got $20,000 and he's paying me." And it's not about that. It also is about psychologically, clients feel a lot easier paying their assets under management than they do having that check come out of their account every month. They just do. I can't explain it. That's just the client it's not a big deal for them when their assets under management. So that's kind of why I structured it that way. I've grandfathered in everybody that I brought over. So some of my clients have under $100,000. I have a number of clients that have 70, 80. They're just paying me the assets under management because that's what they were used to. So now the new clients, that's not the way it is.
Okay. So, and that makes sense. I mean, obviously from a business perspective, it's nice if, all of your clients were also paying you $100 a month. That makes the, launching a firm even easier because you have some immediate revenue coming in. Because like you said, that AUM fee, coming in once a quarter is nice, but getting that $100 a month or $200 a month for every single client.
Well, I do it monthly, Alan, because I want the monthly cash flow.
Okay, so you do AUM on a monthly basis.
Up front, monthly, even better.
All right. Hey, and for some clients, we get caught up a lot talking about like, oh, is it quarterly, in arrears, in advance? Clients don't really know that, they just want to know how much they're paying you. And if it's 1.2% divided by 12, so it's basically 10 basis points a month, like that's fine. They don't, they just want to know how much are they paying you, what's the value that they're getting. And if you're doing financial planning, it is just too easy to explain the real value of what you're doing for them. They're going to pay the fee because, like you said, there's a lot of folks out there charging 1.25%, not doing any financial planning.
And if you go to like Edward Jones or you go to some of the big banks, they charge 1.5%, 1.75%, and they're using mutual funds. Some of these clients are 3% all in versus I use ETFs. I charge 1%. I try to keep the client under 1.25 all in.
Sure.
That's the other thing is when people bring money over from, let's say, a 401k, a lot of times they don't think they're paying anything. But you look at their mutual funds and they're paying 1.25. So they could have an advisor and pay the same thing, or they could, pay Transamerica 1.25 and not talk to anybody but at a call center.
Yeah, and sometimes a lot higher than that. I mean, I think the average mutual fund fee is 1.2% across the board. But if that's the average, Vanguard and BlackRock and some of these guys are pulling that average down. There are a lot of folks above that 1.2% that are holding it up and just charging 2-3% for God knows what. But, it's just the world we come from, and they're able to get the money. And in 401ks, there's always this issue of trying to get funds changed out and all of that. Now, some lawsuits are starting to come out around, being sure that the plan administrator is being a fiduciary and picking good funds to make them accessible. So again, that's a world that's changing rapidly, which is what's kind of fun about financial planning right now, is because I feel like everything is sort of in flux. All these things that we kind of rant and rave about and hate on, a lot of these things in maybe a couple more years, we won't have to be focusing on anymore because it'll sort of be old school. It'll be gone. We won't be complaining anymore. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. But so just to close out sort of the transition with your firm, how did you sell this to your clients that you were going independent, and instead of having a team, it was just going to be you? Like, what was your message to them that, and you were very successful in bringing them with you that maybe other advisors could help, or could mimic as they're sort of making this transition? Well,
the one client that didn't come with me, I tell you, the one thing he said was, I don't like that you're just going and you're going to be with, you're going to be on your own. Okay. My thing was, I said, well, yeah, but now you're going to be with TD Ameritrade, which is an even bigger company that the name. But then the funny thing was, he was okay being at a call center at Prudential with his old 401k more than he was with me. So, there might have been other reasons. So what I did, though, my largest client and my best client, I went and asked them. I didn't tell them what I was going to do, because that's the other thing. Legally, you're not supposed to tell the clients if you're at an old firm that you're leaving to go to a new firm. It's really a weird situation. But Kittis, Michael, he knows more about this than anything, and I've listened to his advice on some of this stuff. So I asked them, in particular, this was a lady, what did she think I was going to be doing in the future? She thought I'd have my own firm eventually. She was the catalyst for me leaving, because I decided, well, if my biggest client thinks that I should leave, then I'm going to take her situation, and that's what I'm going to do. Because then now I can come back to her and say, hey, I listened to what you said. This is the situation why I decided to do this. It was pretty easy for everybody else. I mean, I have a lot of clients I'm close to, whether they're family or friends, or they've just become friends because of over time. And they're there for you. I mean, they're not, they don't really care if you're with, Jim Bob's or Joe's, or they just don't care as long as they feel comfortable. Now, what I did was I took a book out of Alan Moore, and I rented a boardroom, a conference room. So I have a home office and a conference room. I'm not going to be a virtual person. So I do have a virtual client. My first virtual client actually is in New York City, but I want to have an office eventually, because I do find that people over 60, they just feel better that there's a place they can go to, makes them feel more comfortable. So I'd like to have...
Yes, definitely a certain clientele that likes to have an office and be able to meet with you in person.
Yeah. So anyway, so it went smoothly. So, for I think most people, if you have a good relationship, I really wouldn't worry about it. You tell them what you're doing, tell them the benefits. Hey, the benefit is we're going to have more technology. There's just going to be... I kind of talked about the main benefits. For technology was one of the things. It's going to be easier to work together. But the other thing was, I didn't go too much into anything except this is what I'm doing. I didn't even really ask them, do you want to come? I said, hey, this is what we're doing. I need you to sign these papers and we're going to move on, and everybody was like, okay, let me know when we're doing it.
Yeah, you make a great point that sometimes we probably try to over-plan the conversation and overcome objections that haven't even been raised yet. So trying to say, oh, don't worry, here's the 15 reasons why it's okay, and here's the 5 things that you may be upset about, and here's how I'm going to fix them. And instead of just saying like, hey, I think this is what's best for the company, and so that I can be able to take care of my clients. And here's paperwork. We have a new company name. And move on. So it's interesting that how each person has a different approach to it.
I did also, once I told them I was leaving, I also asked some of them for feedback on things from my logo to is I wanted to get them part of the business. I wanted them to buy in, right?
Yeah. Got buy-in from them. That's awesome. How did that go? Were they actually helpful in terms of sort of designing the logo and the name of the firm and things like that?
Yeah. And, even on my website, I asked some of them about pictures and things like that, where I wanted to get their view. Hopefully they don't say something that's totally off guard and then I use the opposite thing, but luckily that didn't happen. So it worked out good. And I feel like they feel like they're part of it. And that, once you do that, that's just about creating a raving fan or someone who really believes in you.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll refer friends and family as they meet people that'll be a good fit for you. So it sounds like you've sort of gone through the transition of getting all your clients moved over. So what does 2017 hold for you? Sort of what's your big plans, or I guess your main priorities for this year?
I used your great spreadsheet that you guys send, planning spreadsheet. Get it first year or whatever it is, that nice.
Oh, the first year budget.
Yes.
Yep.
First year budget. So my goal really is not huge. I mean, I want to get one new client a month. So 12 new clients. I want to, bring over a minimum of $1 million in new assets. And I really think I can do more than that, but I don't want to focus on that. I kind of want to just focus on really activity. And that's kind of my goal. I feel like for me, since I brought over some business, if I can do what just my goal is, it'll put me at the end of next year where I feel like I have cash flow I'll start next year basically paying everything that I need to pay. And it'll put me at a different level where I feel like I can breathe a little more. When you're in the group, the mastermind group, you hear people from all sides of things. And yes, it is tough. I'm in the in-between stage where I do have revenue coming in, but it's not as much as I want or need.
Right. Yeah. Not starting cold, but also not starting with 20 million in assets and, feeling relaxed about things. So yeah, it's awesome that one new client a month and $1 million or so with assets is really going to get you to where you want to be. Because I think that's probably shooting low, in terms of what you could do. But it's awesome that you sort of know the path that you need to be on. So as we're sort of wrapping things up, I'll ask you the question. I haven't been asking it as often lately, and I got a couple of emails about why I wasn't asking anymore. So I'll spring it on you. And that is, if you could go back to a younger Brian, maybe the Brian was thinking about starting your own firm or even before then at the Wirehouse, if there was one thing that you wish you had known then that you know now, one thing you could go back and tell yourself, what do you think that one thing would be?
Well, this could be two. Save more money and don't worry about the money, because I believe that you have to follow your thing. I didn't say this earlier, but I'm married and my wife is fully supportive and my wife has a great job so that helps. So you either need to have money saved, good amount of money, or you need to have a supportive wife or significant other if you're a woman and you're married. Either way, and you need those things to really be successful, I believe. You just can't, you're not selling products. Okay, you're not getting $10,000 bonuses. This is work hard, takes a while, but you'll get there if you keep doing what you're doing.
I love it. And you make a good point with save money. Ultimately, not everybody's ready to just go launch a business. There's always more opportunity than there is cash to pursue those opportunities. So while it is not overly expensive to start a business, it does hit the income side, right? Even if it doesn't cost a lot to outlay the money, it takes a little while to get that revenue flowing. So, well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan, for having me.
This month's podcasts are brought to you by life insurance innovator Haven Life. Haven Life Insurance Agency offers the first non-commission term life insurance that your clients can buy entirely online. The prices are affordable, the application process is simple, and the policies are fully backed by Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. Plus, some qualified, healthy applicants can even be approved for coverage without the need for a medical exam. This is life insurance the modern way. Visit havenlife.com/advisors to learn more about how Haven Life is partnering with fee-only financial advisors. Please note that the opinions expressed by participants on the podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Haven Life. Visit havenlife.com/advisors. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.